Welcome to Ash of Grim, where the shadows speak and the truth is buried beneath the quiet. The waves slammed into the jagged rocks, and the island groaned as if it were alive. Each impact sounded like a breath dragged from something enormous and unseen beneath the water. Thomas coughed, feeling the cold seep deep into his bones. The damp air filled his lungs and refused to leave. His grandfather Silas's old oilskins still smelled of salt, but they did nothing to protect him from the merciless chill of Gull Rock. He raised the kerosene lamp higher. Its weak light dissolved into the fog, and the darkness immediately rushed back to claim its place. He should never have taken this job. He knew that now. Silas had warned him more than once. The sea takes, Thomas, and Gull Rock never forgets. When his grandfather died, people said his final years were lost to dementia. The way he claimed to hear voices in the lantern room, the nights he woke screaming, the shadows he swore moved along the walls. But standing alone on this barren rock, Thomas felt those warnings settle heavily in his chest. The first days passed in silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that pressed against his ears until his own breathing felt too loud. At night, the stone walls of the lighthouse seemed to draw closer. The wind curled through the stairwell, sometimes sounding like footsteps climbing slowly upward. Thomas told himself it was exhaustion. On the third night, he heard the whispers. At first they were vague, like half-formed thoughts. He assumed they were his own imagination. Then they came again, a sound sliding down the spiral staircase, soft voices, persistent, too deliberate to be the wind. He took the lamp and stepped closer to the stairs. The stone steps were slick with moisture. Each footstep echoed. The whispers stopped, as if whatever made them was listening now. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then he felt a breath against his ear, cold, reeking of salt and rot. From that night on, he knew he was not alone. The whispers grew clearer. They spoke names. They begged. They screamed in anger and despair. Sleep became impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces, swollen and pale, mouths open, eyes empty. He heard the sound of lungs filling with seawater, the last desperate gasps of the drowned. One night, while climbing the stairs, he saw it. A darkness that did not reflect the light but consumed it. It clung to the curved wall, its shape shifting and pulsing like a living thing forcing its way through stone. The closer he came, the stronger the smell became. Rotting seaweed, wet flesh, something that had spent far too long beneath the ocean. Thin black tendrils peeled away from the shadow and crept toward him, sliding across the stone. Thomas stepped back. His foot slipped. He barely caught the railing, stopping himself from tumbling down the stairs. The shadow whispered, not one voice, but many, speaking all at once. He fled downstairs and slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands. In his small living quarters, he shoved furniture against the door. He could not stop trembling. Later, in the dim light of the lamp, he saw something moving beneath the crack in the door. Wet, black, scales glistening as it slowly withdrew. Morning came, gray and hollow. The staircase was empty. The shadow was gone, but the whispers remained. They no longer waited for night. They lived inside his ears. He thought about leaving, taking the boat back to the mainland and never looking back, but Silas's face haunted him. This was what his grandfather had stayed for. The light could not go out. He began to write everything down, every sound, every shape, every night. He searched the island's history, shipwrecks torn apart by hidden currents, sailors whose bodies were never found, stories of a group that once came to Gull Rock, lighting fires at night, calling something from the sea. Beneath a loose floorboard, he found Silas's journal.
The light keeps them back. If the light goes out, the door opens. That night, the storm came. The sea raged. Waves battered the lighthouse windows. The whispers became screams. He heard movement on the stairs, wet footsteps, the sound of bodies being dragged upward. The light flickered. Something slammed into the door. Then again, the wood cracked. Black liquid seeped through the gaps, and eyes opened within it. Thomas clutched the lamp, but he knew it was already too late. The lighthouse was no longer a refuge. The light did not keep the darkness out anymore. It kept him inside. Gull Rock remembered, and now so would he.
This wind that night did not seem to come from the sea, but from beneath it. When the waves struck the rocks, the sound was not like a storm, but like a muffled breath. By the time I reached the island, whose name was barely readable on maps, the sun was already setting. From a distance, the lighthouse looked bone white, but the closer I came, the more stained it appeared, as if it had fed for years on nothing but salt and decay. The door of the lighthouse was closed. The key had been given to me by an old man at the harbor. He never told me his name. He only said that the last keeper had disappeared months ago. After storms, they noticed the light turning on by itself. My task was simple. I would stay for a week and check whether the automatic system was functioning. At least that was what I was told. When I opened the door, the smell of rust and seaweed mixed with old oil hit my face. The moment I stepped inside, the door shut behind me on its own. I thought it was the wind, but the air inside was completely still. The stone stairs narrowed as they spiraled upward. These stairs leading to the heart of the lighthouse felt as if they were not going up, but inward. I spent the first night in the small room on the lower floor. There was a table, a bed, and a faded photograph on the wall. 3 men stood in the photo. They must have been lighthouse keepers. Their faces were unclear, but their eyes were strangely sharp. All of them were looking at the same point. On the back of the photograph, there was a date, but the ink had bled. Only the last number was readable, 3. Around midnight, I heard a sound coming from above. It was like metal scraping against metal. The lighthouse mechanism must have been running, but I had not checked the electrical system yet. I got out of bed and moved toward the stairs. With every step I took, the sound stopped. When I stopped, it started again, as if something was listening to me. When I reached the upper level, the light was on. The rotating lens moved slowly, casting shadows across the walls. But the system was disconnected. The cables were removed. There was no power source, yet the lighthouse was working. When I looked into the glass, I saw a reflection behind the lens. It was not mine. The second day, the sea was calm, but the unease inside me grew stronger. I found the journals. They belonged to the last keeper. At first, the writing was neat: daily maintenance notes, weather conditions, passing ships. Then the handwriting began to collapse. Letters leaned, lines tangled together. On the last pages, a single sentence was repeated: "The light is calling me." That night, I dreamed I was walking inside the sea. My feet were not on sand or stone, but on something that felt like flesh. With every step, the lighthouse light came closer. When I woke up, my feet were wet. I had not gone outside. The floor of the room was covered with seawater, yet the walls were completely dry. On the third day, I walked around the island. Among the rocks were pieces of an old boat. There was a name written on it, but it was covered in algae. Only a few letters were visible. They were the same letters as the name in the journal: the last keeper. At the base of the rocks, I found a small bell. Even without wind, it swayed gently. When night fell, the sound of the bell began to echo from inside the lighthouse. As I climbed the stairs, I heard echoes of the past with every step, as if thousands had climbed these stairs before me.
When I reached the light room, I knew I was not alone, not by seeing, but by feeling. The room was full, but no one was visible. The light suddenly stopped. Darkness fell. Then the whispers began. The words were unclear, but they had a rhythm, like waves. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside my head. I heard the sentence from the journal, "The light is calling me," this time in my own voice. On the fourth day, I decided to escape. The boat would not start. Its engine had been removed. The parts were stacked inside the lighthouse, as if someone wanted me to stay there. As I went down the stairs, the photograph fell from the wall. The glass shattered. This time, the faces were clear. There were not 3 men, but 4. The 4th was me. That night, the lighthouse light never turned off. The lens spun faster. The shadows separated from the walls and began to take shape. Human silhouettes climbed the stairs. They had no faces, but they were watching. One of them approached me. It reached out its hand. It was not a hand, but a wet bone. When it touched me, a memory awakened inside. I had been here before. I remembered. Years ago, I was on a ship. A storm had risen. The light had guided us. We survived, but someone was missing. Me. That night, I had fallen into the sea. The light was the last thing I saw. That light had never let me go. When morning came, the lighthouse was silent. The light was off. There was no one on the island. Weeks later, the old man at the harbor said the light had turned on again. The automatic system was still disconnected, but the light was rotating. One more person had appeared in the photograph. The face was unclear, but the eyes were looking toward the sea. That lighthouse is still lit. Those who sail at night say the light sometimes comes too close, as if it is not showing the way, but itself. If one day you go to that island and the door closes behind you, do not look at the light, because the moment you do, you will hear the call, and some calls, once heard, never fall silent.
When he first arrived at the lighthouse, the silence comforted him. The sound of the wind, the waves striking the rocks, and the steady rhythm of the rotating light, everything felt under control. His assignment was clear: stay here, keep the lighthouse operational, and wait for the boat that would come to take him back. That boat never came. The first years passed quietly. He measured time by the light. Each full rotation meant another day survived. Eventually, days lost meaning. Seasons blurred together. When the food supplies began to shrink, he understood that this isolation was not temporary. As the stockpiles dwindled, he disciplined his body. 1 meal a day, then half, sometimes only a few bites. Hunger weakened him physically, but sharpened his mind in unsettling ways. He flinched at the smallest sound. He knew every creak of the lighthouse by heart, yet some noises no longer matched that memory. The first time he woke in the middle of the night and noticed the light was not moving, panic took hold. He rushed upstairs. The light was turning, but without rhythm. It sped up, slowed down, then stopped entirely. He checked the mechanism. Everything was intact. He told himself it was exhaustion. Then the stairs began to change. During the day, he counted the steps, and the number was always the same. At night, they seemed endless. He climbed until his lungs burned, yet never reached the light room. One night, when he gave up and turned back, he found himself not at the bottom, but outside the lighthouse, standing in front of the door. His shoes were soaked with seawater. As the nights passed, the sounds grew clearer. Whispers became voices. He could not understand the words, but he could distinguish their tones. Some were pleading, some were whispering, some breathed with anger. All of them grew louder when he looked toward the light. One night,
He woke to the smell of the sea inside his room, sharp and heavy. On the floor were wet footprints. They did not lead to the door, they led to his bed. He did not dare look at himself. He closed his eyes and sat awake until morning. Soon, he began seeing reflections in the glass of the lighthouse, silhouettes standing behind him. When he turned, no one was there, but the reflections lingered for a few seconds longer. Once, the figure in the glass smiled at him. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. He continued writing in his journal. It was the only way to hold on to his sanity. One day, he opened it and found pages written in an older hand than his own. The paper looked yellowed, the ink was blurred, yet the journal itself was new. The entries listed names of previous keepers. Beside some of the names was a single word: stayed. Hunger became unbearable. When he opened the last can, it did not contain meat, but seashells. He did not know if it was real. He ate it anyway. That night he dreamed of people kneeling around the lighthouse. All of them were staring at the light. Their eyes had been carved out, yet their faces were calm. After that, the lighthouse began to respond to him. When he spoke, the light sped up. When he stayed silent, it slowed down. When he said his own name, it stopped completely. That was the moment he knew it was not coincidence. The light was listening. On the final night, there was a knock at his door. He did not open it. Breathing came from the other side, not one breath, but many. Dark liquid seeped under the door, not seawater, something thicker, heavier. When the door finally opened, he saw himself standing there, thinner, paler, and smiling. In the morning, the lighthouse was still lit. The man was gone. A journal lay on the table. On the final page, written in trembling lines, were the words, "The light loves hunger. The light does not release those who wait." Months later, a crew arrived to inspect the island. They found no one. The lighthouse was operating, though the system was disconnected. The journals were on a dusty table. Since then, fishermen claim that at night they sometimes see more than one silhouette inside the light, all of them facing the same direction, not the sea, the shore, as if waiting for someone new to arrive.